She transformed from battlefield medic to deadly sniper, a moment the SEALs will never forget. I want to thank you for being here today. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. The morning air at the military base was still and quiet as soldiers moved through their routine. Among them was Specialist Lily Nguyen, a woman who blended into the crowd. She wasn't tall, she wasn't loud, and her presence was easily overlooked. Lily was simply sitting at a table in the comms room, working on the gear that most of her comrades had long taken for granted. The radio systems, the communication devices, the cables, they were all part of her day-to-day. No one seemed to notice that she was the one who kept it all running smoothly, ensuring that every transmission was crystal clear. As the men in the room chattered about their upcoming missions, about weapons, and about strategies, no one took a second glance at Lily. She worked with a focused calm, her hands steady as she soldered a wire back into place, her attention entirely on the task at hand. "Hey, Lily," one of the soldiers said, leaning over her shoulder. "How long is it gonna take for you to fix this junk?" His voice was dismissive, like the broken comms equipment was just a nuisance. He chuckled to himself, not realizing that Lily had heard the joke 1,000 times before. She didn't react, just continued working as if she hadn't heard him. That was how Lily operated, under the radar, keeping to herself, letting her work speak for itself. As the day went on, the soldiers continued to talk about the next big operation, speculating about the details, making jokes, laughing loudly. But Lily was the silent worker, quietly ensuring that the gear was ready, that everything was in top shape for their missions. Minutes passed, and the chatter in the room faded into the background. But the tension that would soon fill. The room was already there, lingering in the air. You see, Lily wasn't just any soldier. She wasn't just a communications specialist who happened to be good with equipment. No, Lily Nguyen was a Navy SEAL, one of the most elite soldiers in the world, and she had been hiding her true identity all along. She had chosen not to announce it, not to boast or show off. She had come here to do her job and keep a low profile, to let others underestimate her. After all, what was more dangerous than a woman who didn't feel the need to prove herself to anyone? But all of that was about to change. As Lily continued to make the necessary repairs, a loud voice echoed through the room, demanding attention. "Lily, is that comms gear ready?" It was Lieutenant Thomas, the commanding officer, his tone sharp as usual. Lily looked up from her work for the first time, meeting his gaze with a calm expression. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady and cool. She stood, lifting the comms gear and handing it to him. The room fell silent as the soldiers watched their lieutenant take the equipment from her. But there was something different in the way they looked at her now. Something they hadn't noticed before. As Thomas turned to leave, he stopped for a moment and turned back toward her. "Good job, Specialist Nguyen," he said, his voice softer than before. He gave her a quick nod, a gesture of respect. The men around him exchanged confused glances. It wasn't just the work Lily had done that had impressed them, but something else, something in her presence, something about the way she carried herself. It was the first time they truly saw her, and they realized something they hadn't known before. She wasn't just the quiet, unassuming soldier who fixed their gear. She was more. Much more. As the moment passed, the men went back to their conversations, but they no longer saw Lily the same way. They had underestimated her, and now they were beginning to realize that they had just been in the presence of greatness. Lily smiled to herself, her work done. She had proven once again that the strongest warriors didn't always need to show their strength. Sometimes, it was enough to simply be underestimated. And she was perfectly fine with that. The real test, however, was still to come. Just wait until they learned what she was truly capable of. As the day progressed, the soldiers around Lily continued their work, but there was a shift in the air. Some of them, who had previously ridiculed her, now looked at her with a sense of respect they hadn't shown before. It wasn't because of anything she had said, but something in the way she had carried herself, her quiet competence. But Lily didn't let their newfound attention affect her. She was used to being underestimated, used to working quietly in the background. And today was no different. She returned to her work, her fingers expertly adjusting the delicate equipment in front of her. The comms room, usually filled with the hum of machinery and the chatter of soldiers, had a newfound tension. People were more focused now, perhaps subconsciously aware that they had misjudged someone they should have respected. But Lily didn't feel the need to confront them or even acknowledge their change in attitude. She had a job to do. And that was all that mattered. As she continued to fix the equipment, she heard footsteps approaching. The familiar sound of boots on the concrete floor grew closer, and soon, Lieutenant Thomas was standing beside her again. He cleared his throat, and Lily looked up, her eyes meeting his. He had always been a stern leader, one who didn't waste words. But today, there was something different in his gaze. He wasn't just looking at her as a specialist, as a subordinate. For the first time, he seemed to truly see her. "Specialist Nguyen," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "we've got a situation. I need someone to oversee the communications during the upcoming operation. I trust you're ready for this." Lily didn't answer immediately. She simply nodded, her face unreadable. She had known this moment would come. She had been waiting for it. As the days had passed and the mission loomed closer, she had quietly prepared herself for the role she knew she was destined to play. But she wasn't going to jump at the chance to prove herself. She wasn't here to show off or brag. She was here to do her job, and that was exactly what she was going to do. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady and confident. Lieutenant Thomas seemed to hesitate for a moment, then gave a small nod. He turned and began to walk away, but then stopped and glanced back at her. "Good. We'll be counting on you." Lily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The message was clear. As he left the room, Lily's mind raced, but she didn't let it show. She had a mission now, and this was where she would prove her worth, not through words, but through action. The team had no idea what she was capable of, but they would soon find out. And as she glanced at the comms gear in front of her, the weight of her responsibility began to sink in. She wasn't just fixing equipment anymore. She was preparing for something bigger. Something that would require every ounce of skill she had honed over the years. The operation would be critical. And for the first time, Lily allowed herself to think about the possibilities of what would happen once the mission was underway. The other soldiers had seen her as just another technician, but they didn't know the half of it. They didn't know about the years of training, the countless hours spent in the field, and the deadly precision she had perfected over time. They didn't know that Lily Nguyen was one of the best Navy SEALs in the world. And soon, they would. As she finished her work, she stood up and adjusted her uniform, preparing herself for what was to come. The mission was close, and there was no turning back now. She had no intention of hiding anymore. When the time came, she would be ready. The soldiers who had once underestimated her would soon see exactly what she was capable of. And when they did, they would understand why Lily Nguyen had earned the respect she deserved. As the team gathered in the briefing room for the mission's final preparations, the tension in the air was palpable. Lily took her seat quietly, blending into the background once more. But this time, no one dared underestimate her. Not anymore. The mission briefing was intense. The room was filled with officers and soldiers, all focused on the critical operation ahead. Lily sat quietly, her hands folded on the table, her expression calm and composed. No one could tell that beneath her exterior, a storm of thoughts was running through her mind. This mission was unlike any other, and it would test her in ways she had not faced before. The plan was simple, but the execution would require precision and skill beyond anything most of the soldiers in the room could comprehend. As the briefing continued, Lily glanced at the team around her, most of them still unaware of her true capabilities. They discussed the strategy, the roles they would play, and the obstacles they might encounter. But Lily wasn't focused on the plan, they all knew their part. She was already thinking several steps ahead, calculating every possible outcome in her mind. She had been in situations like this before. Dangerous, high-stakes operations were nothing new to her. But this time, there was something different. This time, the team was counting on her. They just didn't know it yet. The briefing wrapped up, and the soldiers filed out of the room. As they gathered their gear and prepared for deployment, Lily moved toward the equipment station to gather her own supplies. Her hands moved with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years in the field, preparing for moments like this. The soldiers around her barely noticed as she checked her gear, ensuring that everything was in perfect condition. She was ready. But as she looked at the team one last time, she couldn't help but wonder, would they ever realize who she really was? Would they ever understand the true weight of her presence in this mission? The thought lingered in her mind as they boarded the transport vehicles and set off toward the operation zone. The drive was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Lily could feel the unease in the air, the soldiers around her bracing for what lay ahead. But she remained calm, her mind focused on the task at hand. As they approached the target location, the tension grew, and Lily's heart began to race, not with fear, but with the quiet excitement of knowing that everything she had trained for had led her to this moment. They arrived at the edge of the operation zone, the terrain rugged and unforgiving. The soldiers quickly disembarked, moving into position as the operation began. Lily's role was critical, though no one around her realized it yet. She moved silently through the terrain, her every step calculated, her senses heightened. She had done this 1,000 times, but something about this mission felt different. The time for secrecy was coming to an end, and soon, her true skills would be revealed. As they reached their first objective, the team encountered resistance. Gunfire erupted in the distance, and the soldiers responded quickly, returning fire and taking cover. But while the team was focused on the firefight ahead, Lily moved with the precision of a seasoned operator, setting up her position in a concealed location. She was waiting for the moment to strike, the moment when her skills as a sniper would make all the difference. As the team engaged the enemy, Lily's calm voice came through the radio, "I have a clean shot." The rest of the team fell silent. They hadn't expected it. They hadn't realized that Lily was the one with the perfect vantage point, the one with the training to take the shot that would change everything. The silence was only broken by the sound of her rifle's report as she took the shot, her target dropping instantly. The team was stunned, but they quickly regrouped, moving forward with renewed confidence. They hadn't seen her coming, but now, they knew. Lily had saved the operation. As the mission continued, Lily's true capabilities began to shine through. Each move she made was calculated, her every action precise and effective. The soldiers who had once looked down on her now watched her with awe, their respect for her growing with each passing moment. The mission was a success, and as they wrapped up, Lily allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had done it, not for the recognition, but for the mission, for the team. They would never forget the woman who had quietly proven herself to be the true force behind their success. And as the team boarded the transport back, Lily remained in the background, once again slipping into the shadows. She was content with the way things had gone. Her job was done, and her identity, her true identity, remained her secret. But the soldiers around her would never see her the same way again. The mission was a success, but as Lily sat in the debriefing room with the rest of the team, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She had done what was expected of her, performed flawlessly under pressure, saved the operation, and proven her worth. Yet, despite all of that, no one had truly acknowledged her. They were all too focused on the success of the mission itself, on the objectives achieved, and on the praise from higher-ups. It was the way things worked in the military. The job got done, and everyone moved on. But for Lily, it wasn't just about completing the mission, it was about proving that she could be more than the quiet technician they all had once ignored. The soldiers around her were still congratulating each other, shaking hands and exchanging stories of their personal experiences during the operation. They didn't realize that Lily had been the one to ensure their success from the shadows. They didn't know how her calm, calculated approach had made all the difference. For a moment, Lily felt a pang of frustration, but she quickly pushed it aside. She didn't need their recognition. She had never needed it. But as she gathered her gear and prepared to leave the room, she couldn't help but wonder if they would ever truly understand who she was. Would they ever realize that the woman they had once dismissed was a Navy SEAL, someone who had earned her place among the elite? The thought lingered as she walked down the hallway, the sounds of her teammates' laughter fading behind her. She had always been content to stay in the background, to do the work without drawing attention. But after today, things were different. Lily knew it, and deep down, she knew that the team knew it too. They just hadn't come to terms with it yet. The days following the mission were quiet. The base returned to its usual routine, but there was an undercurrent of change. The soldiers around Lily seemed more respectful, more aware of her presence. They didn't speak to her as much as they did before, but their actions spoke volumes. They had seen what she was capable of, and they had begun to realize that she wasn't just another cog in the machine. She was someone who could make a difference when it counted. Yet, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Her mission had been successful, yes, but she knew there would be more challenges ahead. More moments where she would have to prove herself. And she was ready for them. Lily had spent years honing her skills, perfecting her craft as a Navy SEAL. But there was always more to learn, always more to achieve. She wasn't done yet, and the world still had no idea what she was truly capable of. As the days passed, Lily continued to work in the comms room, quietly doing her job and maintaining her low profile. She didn't seek attention, but she noticed the subtle shifts in the way the soldiers treated her. The whispers had stopped, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and silent respect. They had learned their lesson. It wasn't until a week later that she was called into Lieutenant Thomas's office again. This time, however, the tone was different. He looked at her with a newfound respect, as if seeing her for the first time. "Specialist Nguyen," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of admiration, "we've got another mission coming up, and we need the best. I want you to oversee the comms, but I also want you to be ready for anything. This is going to be a critical operation." Lily didn't respond immediately. She had heard this before, but this time, the words felt different. This time, they weren't just about fixing equipment. They were about her stepping up, about her taking charge. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm but determined. As she left the office, she couldn't help but smile to herself. The recognition was subtle, but it was there. The soldiers had finally realized who she was, what she was capable of. And now, it was time for her to show them just how much they had underestimated her. The mission ahead would test everything. But Lily was ready. She had always been ready. And this time, there would be no hiding in the shadows. She would step forward, not for the recognition, but because she knew that she was the best for the job. As the operation loomed closer, Lily prepared herself. She would prove, once again, that no one should ever underestimate the quiet, unassuming soldier who had been trained to be one of the best Navy SEALs in the world. The day of the operation had finally arrived, and Lily was ready. She stood at the command center, overseeing the communications gear, but her mind was focused on the mission itself. The team had been briefed, the strategy had been set, and everything was in place for a successful operation. Yet, Lily knew better than anyone that things rarely went according to plan in the field. She had learned that lesson through years of experience. As the operation began, the sound of the team mobilizing echoed throughout the command center, but Lily stayed calm, her fingers moving expertly over the control panels. She monitored every communication, making sure that all channels remained clear and that the team had the information they needed at every step. The first part of the operation went smoothly, with the team advancing through the terrain as planned, but as they approached their target location, things started to change. Static filled the airwaves, the usual clear transmissions from the team began to break up, and Lily immediately knew that something was wrong. She tightened her grip on the controls and adjusted the frequency, trying to restore the connection. It wasn't just interference, someone was jamming their signals. She quickly accessed the satellite network and tried to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. The seconds felt like hours as she worked tirelessly, every instinct telling her that time was running out. Finally, the screen flickered to life, and she was able to restore the signal just long enough to hear a faint transmission from Lieutenant Thomas. "Nguyen, we're under fire. Get us back up now." The urgency in his voice sent a chill down her spine, but she didn't hesitate. She immediately activated the emergency backup protocol, sending out a distress signal while simultaneously contacting the command center for additional support. "Stay with me, Lieutenant," she muttered under her breath, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked to get them the help they desperately needed. She wasn't about to let anyone down, not after everything she had proven. As the team fought to hold their position, Lily remained calm under pressure, her focus entirely on the mission. She worked through the chaos, coordinating communications and ensuring that the team had a steady line of support. It felt like hours before backup finally arrived, but it was only a matter of minutes. The reinforcements came in fast, their presence a welcome relief to the soldiers trapped in the firefight. But just as the situation seemed to stabilize, a new problem emerged. Lily's screen flashed red, an incoming threat on the radar. It was a missile, heading straight for their location. The moment it appeared, her mind went into overdrive, processing the incoming data at lightning speed. "All units, take cover," she shouted through the comms, but it was too late for most of them. The missile hit the target, but by some miracle, the blast wasn't as devastating as it could have been. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the aftermath unfold on the screen. The explosion had caused chaos, but the team was still alive. They had been given a second chance. As the dust settled and the team regrouped, they made their way to the target. The mission was still on track, but the danger was far from over. Lily stayed focused, coordinating the next phase of the operation, guiding the team through the next set of obstacles with the precision that only she could bring. Despite the chaos around her, she never lost her cool. She was the calm in the storm, the steady hand that held everything together. As the team reached their final objective, the reality of the operation began to hit. They had done it, they had completed the mission against all odds. But it wasn't just the victory that made Lily proud. It was the fact that she had been the one to keep everything running smoothly. She wasn't just the quiet technician anymore, she was the one they had relied on, the one who had seen them through the worst of it. As they boarded the transport to return to base, the team was quiet, their minds still processing the events of the day. But as Lily took her seat, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had underestimated her once, but not anymore. They knew who she was now. She wasn't just a communications specialist. She was Navy SEAL Lily Nguyen, and she had proven herself to be more than capable. As the transport vehicle rumbled forward, Lily looked out the window, her thoughts calm and collected. There was no need for celebration. She had done her job, and that was all that mattered. The recognition would come later, but for now, she was content in the knowledge that she had done what needed to be done. She had earned her place among the elite, and no one would ever forget who she was again. The days following the mission were a blur of routine tasks, debriefings, and paperwork, but for Lily, things felt different. She had proven herself in the field, shown her true capabilities, and now, as the dust settled, she was left to process everything. The respect she had earned from her peers was undeniable, but it wasn't the recognition that mattered most. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had done her job, and done it well. As she walked through the base, she noticed the subtle shift in how people looked at her. The whispers had stopped, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and silent respect. She no longer felt invisible, but she didn't need the spotlight. She had learned long ago that the greatest accomplishments often came from staying in the background, allowing your actions to speak for themselves. Yet, even as she moved through the base, a part of her wondered if anyone would ever fully understand the magnitude of what she had done. Would they ever truly grasp that she wasn't just the quiet technician, the unassuming soldier? Would they recognize the years of training, the sacrifices, and the countless hours spent perfecting her craft as a Navy SEAL? The truth was, Lily didn't expect anyone to fully comprehend. She had made peace with the fact that her role was often behind the scenes, that she would always be the one working quietly in the background, ensuring everything went smoothly. And she was okay with that. But that didn't mean she was going to let anyone forget who she was. Days turned into weeks, and Lily continued to excel in her role. She kept her focus on her work, ensuring that everything ran efficiently and that her team had what they needed to succeed. But every now and then, when she caught the eye of a fellow soldier, she saw the respect in their gaze, the understanding that she was more than what they had first assumed. One afternoon, as she was leaving the comms room, she was stopped by Lieutenant Thomas. He looked at her with a mixture of respect and something else, something she hadn't seen in him before. "Lily," he said, his voice a bit softer than usual, "I wanted to thank you again. You really came through on that last mission. We wouldn't have made it without you." Lily simply nodded, her face neutral, but inside, she felt a flicker of pride. She wasn't doing this for the thanks, but it was nice to hear it all the same. "I'm just doing my job, sir," she replied, her voice calm and steady. "That's what I'm here for." Lieutenant Thomas studied her for a moment, and for the first time, Lily saw a genuine understanding in his eyes. "I know," he said, his tone sincere. "But I think we all underestimated you." "I certainly did. I won't forget that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. She had earned his respect, and that was all she needed. As the weeks went by, Lily continued to perform her duties with quiet precision. The team's opinion of her had changed, and while the respect was there, she didn't let it get to her head. She wasn't in this for accolades or attention. She was in it to do her job, to serve her country, and to be the best at what she did. And that was enough. One evening, as Lily was finishing her shift and preparing to leave the base, she ran into a few of the soldiers she had worked with during the mission. They greeted her with nods and casual conversation, but something was different. They weren't just acknowledging her as a fellow soldier anymore. They were acknowledging her as someone who had earned their trust, someone they could rely on in a crisis. The recognition was subtle, but it was there. As she walked away, Lily couldn't help but smile to herself. She hadn't needed to prove anything to them. She had done what she was trained to do, and that was enough. She had shown them who she was, not with words, but with actions. She had earned her place among the best. And in that quiet moment, Lily felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She wasn't just another soldier in the background anymore. She was Navy SEAL Lily Nguyen, and she had earned every ounce of respect that came her way. Months passed, and Lily continued her work at the base. Her routine was familiar, her role clear, and though the respect from her peers had become a constant, she never allowed herself to get complacent. The quiet acknowledgement was enough, the need for validation had long since faded. Lily was content with her position, being an invisible force, the one who kept things running smoothly from behind the scenes. However, her quiet life would soon be disrupted once again. It started with a mission briefing. The commanding officers gathered the unit, detailing a new high-priority mission that would take them deep into hostile territory. The briefing was intense, filled with intelligence about the enemy and tactical strategies. The team listened intently, their eyes fixed on the projector screen as maps of the region were displayed. The operation was dangerous, the kind of mission that would test even the most experienced soldiers. As the briefing continued, Lily's mind began to race, her instincts kicking in. She hadn't been called into many field missions lately, her role had been primarily behind the scenes. But this mission was different. It wasn't just about fixing equipment, it was about being part of the action. When the officers finished presenting the plan, they opened the floor for questions. Lily raised her hand, her voice calm and steady as she spoke. "Sir, have we accounted for communication interference in the target zone?" The room fell silent, the team turning to her. It wasn't an unusual question, but the way Lily asked it, the clarity in her tone, caught their attention. Lieutenant Thomas, who had once underestimated her, now nodded with respect. "Good point, Specialist. We'll need to ensure our comms are secure. Any recommendations?" Lily stood up, moving toward the board as she outlined a strategy for securing the communication channels. She wasn't just offering her input as a technician, she was offering insight as someone who had the experience to understand the battlefield dynamics. The room was silent as she spoke, each member of the team taking in her words, their respect for her growing. It wasn't long before the commanding officers turned to her for more tactical insights, something that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. As the mission details were finalized and the team prepared to depart, Lily found herself at the center of the operation. She wasn't just a technician anymore, she was a crucial part of the strategy, someone whose expertise was indispensable. The transition from being an overlooked soldier to an essential member of the team felt surreal, but Lily embraced it. She knew she was ready. The mission was set to begin early the next morning. The soldiers were tense, preparing for what lay ahead. Lily, however, was calm. She had prepared for this moment for years, even if it hadn't been the way she expected. As the team boarded the transport vehicle, Lily moved with purpose, her mind already working through the logistics of communication. She checked her gear, ensuring everything was in order. The vehicle rumbled to life, and the soldiers settled in for the ride. As they drove toward their target, Lily's thoughts remained focused on the task at hand. She had been in tight situations before, and she knew that the real challenge wasn't just in the mission, it was in how you handled the pressure. They arrived at the drop zone under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with tension as the soldiers prepared to deploy. Lily was quick to set up the comms equipment, ensuring that every communication channel was active and secure. The team moved into position, their movements swift and efficient. They had trained for this moment, and now, the time had come to execute the plan. As they advanced, the enemy's presence became apparent. Gunfire rang out in the distance, and the soldiers went into action. But as the team pushed forward, Lily stayed focused on her task. Her mind was in overdrive, analyzing every transmission, ensuring that their lines remained clear and that the team could coordinate effectively. Moments later, an unexpected ambush caught the team off guard. Enemy forces were closing in from all sides. The situation quickly escalated, and the team was under heavy fire. Despite the chaos around her, Lily remained calm, her fingers flying over the comms gear as she worked to secure the team's communications. The radio crackled with urgent calls for backup, but Lily's mind was already racing ahead, anticipating the team's needs. She quickly relayed coordinates for air support and called for additional reinforcements. Her actions were swift, precise, and unwavering. As the backup arrived and the situation began to stabilize, Lily continued to direct operations from the rear. The soldiers around her moved with renewed confidence, knowing that their communications were in good hands. The mission was far from over, but Lily had proven herself once again. She wasn't just a quiet technician in the background anymore. She was a vital part of the operation, the one who had kept the team connected when everything else seemed to fall apart. And as the mission continued, one thing became clear: Lily had earned her place at the table, not just as a soldier, but as someone whose skills were unmatched, someone who could be relied on when it mattered most. As the mission continued, Lily found herself in a position she had never expected. The enemy forces were relentless, and despite their best efforts, the team was pushed back, caught in a dangerous firefight. They had made significant progress, but the ambush had turned the tide, and now they were fighting for their survival. The sound of gunfire echoed through the dense jungle, and the air was thick with the tension of the battle. The team had formed a defensive perimeter, their backs to each other as they tried to hold off the advancing enemy. But it wasn't just the enemy's firepower that threatened them now, it was the weight of the situation itself. The team was running low on supplies, their ammunition dwindling, and reinforcements were still miles away. The pressure was mounting, and Lily knew that the team's survival depended on their ability to maintain communication and coordination. As the battle raged on, Lily's focus remained unwavering. She wasn't on the front lines, but she was just as involved. Her job was critical. She had to ensure the team had constant access to intelligence, to real-time information, to anything that could help them turn the tide. Her hands moved rapidly across the comms equipment, adjusting frequencies, listening for any incoming updates from headquarters or the reinforcements. Her voice cut through the chaos as she directed the team's movements, coordinating every tactical decision, ensuring that they stayed connected in the face of the overwhelming odds. But as the hours wore on, it became clear that the situation was growing more dire. The enemy had surrounded them on all sides, and there was no escape. Lily knew that they couldn't hold out much longer. They had to make a move. "We need to fall back," Lily said, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of the decision. The soldiers around her looked at her, waiting for her lead. They had come to rely on her, not just for the technical aspects of the mission, but for her calmness under pressure, her ability to think critically when everything else seemed to be falling apart. "We'll head east, through the canyon. I'll guide you," Lily continued, her voice unwavering. "We need to make it to the extraction point. We've got one chance." The team members nodded, their faces grim. They trusted Lily. They knew that if anyone could get them out of this, it was her. As the order was given to move, Lily's mind raced. The canyon would be treacherous, and if the enemy had already anticipated their move, it would be a death trap. But there was no other choice. The team began to move, keeping low to the ground, their weapons raised as they advanced cautiously. Lily's eyes scanned the terrain as they moved, her mind working overtime, calculating the safest route, anticipating the enemy's next move. As they made their way toward the canyon, the enemy began to close in, their gunfire coming closer with each step. Lily kept in constant communication with the team, guiding them through the narrow passageways, keeping them one step ahead. But just as they reached the mouth of the canyon, disaster struck. An enemy sniper, hidden high in the trees, fired at them, taking out two of the team members before anyone had a chance to react. The chaos that followed was immediate. Lily's heart raced as she heard the gunfire, but her mind stayed clear. She quickly relayed instructions to the remaining soldiers, directing them to take cover and return fire. But the sniper's position was well hidden, and every time they moved, they risked being picked off one by one. Lily knew that the only way to survive this was to turn the tables. "I'm going to take the shot," she said, her voice cool as ever. The team turned to her, confused at first, but then they saw the determination in her eyes. They had no other choice. "Lily, you can't," Lieutenant Thomas began, but Lily was already moving. Without another word, she made her way to a concealed position, setting up her rifle and locking in on the sniper's location. Her training kicked in, every movement calculated, every breath controlled. She had done this 1,000 times before. She was calm. She was precise. And she would not fail. As she lined up her shot, the world seemed to slow down. She could feel the tension in her muscles, the anticipation building in her chest. Her finger hovered over the trigger, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, in one smooth motion, she squeezed the trigger, sending the bullet flying toward the sniper's position. The shot rang out, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, the sniper dropped, his body falling from the trees. The team let out a collective breath, the danger momentarily passed. But the battle wasn't over. They still had to reach the extraction point, and the clock was ticking. As the team continued their advance, Lily stayed close behind, her eyes scanning the terrain, ensuring that they weren't walking into another trap. The enemy was still out there, but Lily had given them a fighting chance. Her quick thinking, her calmness under pressure, had saved their lives. The team moved with renewed confidence, knowing that they could rely on Lily to guide them through the rest of the mission. They finally reached the extraction point, where the helicopter was waiting, and as they boarded the chopper, Lily looked back at the battlefield. The mission was over, but she knew that this would be just another chapter in her journey. She wasn't just the quiet technician anymore. She was Navy SEAL Lily Nguyen, and the world would never underestimate her again. The mission was over, but for Lily, the work was just beginning. As the helicopter soared through the sky, leaving the battlefield behind, she leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a brief moment of peace. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the weight of the operation began to settle in. They had survived, they had completed the mission, but at what cost? The team had lost valuable members, and though they had made it out alive, the scars of the mission would remain long after they returned to base. Lily knew that the emotional toll would take time to process, but for now, all she could do was focus on the immediate task ahead, returning to base, debriefing, and moving on. When the helicopter touched down, the team disembarked, their faces solemn but relieved. They had made it. As they walked through the base, the usual sounds of soldiers preparing for the next mission filled the air, but Lily noticed something different this time. The soldiers around her were no longer looking at her with the same indifference they once had. There was a newfound respect in their eyes, a recognition of her true abilities. She wasn't just the quiet technician anymore. She had proven herself as a Navy SEAL, someone who could lead and think on her feet under pressure, someone who could save a mission when everything seemed lost. As Lily entered the debriefing room, Lieutenant Thomas was already waiting. The room was filled with officers and commanders, but there was a noticeable shift in the way they looked at her. They no longer saw her as just another soldier, they saw her as one of their own, someone who had earned their place through action. Specialist Nguyen, Lieutenant Thomas said, his voice steady, "You did good out there. You kept the team together, and you got us out when we needed it most. I won't forget that." Lily nodded, her expression calm, but inside, she felt a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't the praise that mattered, it was the recognition. She had earned it. She wasn't just an invisible part of the team anymore, she was an integral one. The debriefing continued, but Lily's mind was already moving forward. She knew that there would always be another mission, another challenge to face, and another chance to prove herself. But for now, she allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. She had come a long way since her first day on base, when she was the quiet technician working in the shadows. Now, she was the one leading the charge, the one others looked to for guidance when things got tough. As the debriefing came to a close, Lily stood up and left the room, her thoughts focused on what was to come. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was a Navy SEAL. She already knew it. She had proven it time and time again, not with words, but with actions. The soldiers who had once doubted her now saw her for who she truly was. But Lily didn't let it go to her head. She wasn't in this for the recognition or the glory. She was here to do her job, to serve her country, and to be the best she could be. And that was enough. The next few days were filled with routine, but Lily remained focused. She didn't dwell on the mission, on the victory, or on the recognition. She had learned long ago that in the military, there was always another mission, another operation to prepare for. She was ready. As she walked through the base, she saw the soldiers she had worked with, there. Nods of respect confirming that they now understood who she was. But Lily didn't need their acknowledgement. She knew what she was capable of, and that was all that mattered. As the sun set over the base, casting a warm glow across the field, Lily stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching the soldiers go through their drills. She wasn't just one of them anymore. She was a leader, a warrior, a Navy SEAL. And as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Lily knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more battles, more missions, and more challenges ahead. But she was ready for whatever came next. She had earned her place among the best, and nothing could take that away from her. She was Navy SEAL Lily Nguyen, and she would continue to prove herself, day after day, mission after mission. And in the end, that was all she needed.